hardest road trips. We were driving a hospital Land Rover and ambulance out of a remote town in northern Ghana. Me, my husband, our 4 homeschool kids, a driver, and a hospital employee transporting TB samples in a Coleman cooler in the back. The roads were what I can only describe as aggressive. 3 hours, no air conditioning, malaria in my system. I was just recovering from malaria, and the knowledge from the previous night that our flight out of Africa had just been canceled by the Ghanaian government. We were hopeful we could get a flight. Somewhere in the middle of all that, my husband was quizzing our kids on mental math from the back seats, aka the ambulance seats, in the vehicle. That was our homeschool on a road in Africa with TB samples. That trip taught me more about what homeschooling really looks like, what it actually is, than any curriculum guide I've ever read. Welcome, whether you just pulled your kids out of school last week, or you're still deciding, or maybe you're a few months in, or you're planning in September and quietly wondering if you've made one of the most difficult mistakes, challenging mistakes, possibly most expensive mistakes of your life. Well, you're in the right place. I'm Teresa Wiedrich. I'm a certified homeschool life coach, a graduated homeschool mom of 4, and the author of Homeschool Mama Self-Care, Nurturing the Nurturer. And I've been doing this coaching work long enough to know that the things that make or break your first-year homeschool is almost never what you think it is. It's not a discussion on curriculum. It's not a discussion on getting the right routines down or the right methods. It's not whether you have a dedicated schoolroom or a kitchen table or a couch or some library books. It's what's happening on the inside, in you. That is what this series is all about. I'm calling this series the Confident Homeschool Roadmap, and I mean that literally. We are going on a road trip together, 7 videos, 7 stops along the route, and by the time we get to the end, you are going to feel less like someone white-knuckling the steering wheel on an unmarked road, and more like someone who knows where she's going and why. Now, I have taken a lot of road trips with my kids and also without, but mostly with them. One of the longest ones I've driven is from Kamloops, British Columbia to Tuktoyaktuk in the Northwest Territories, where we actually touched the Arctic Ocean, in which, if you're not Canadian, is essentially driving from civilization to the top of the earth. I've navigated rental cars in Italy, taxis in Accra, Ghana, and bush roads in rural Africa. And I've learned a few things about road trips that I think apply directly to your first year of homeschooling. First, you don't have to know every turn before you leave the driveway. Whew, thank goodness. You need to know your destination and your next exit. Second, the unexpected detours are almost always the best part. The flat tire 8 hours from civilization, or specifically on the Dempster Highway between Dawson City and Inuvik. That was our experience. The wrong turn that leads to something better. The moment your 5-year-old starts playing Duck, Duck, Goose with 40 Ghanaian kids in the terracotta dust, and you realize this is an education. Third, you need someone who's been on the road before to ride along with you, not to drive, to sit in the passenger seat, read the map, and say, you got this, turn here. That's what I'm here to do. Now, I want to speak directly to you. If you are brand new to this thing, you might be feeling something that's hard to describe. It might be excitement. It's not quite excitement. Maybe it's not quite terror, but it's a lot of fear or uncertainty. It's both, tangled together. And underneath it is this very persistent question. Am I actually qualified to do this? I want you to hear me say something, and I want you to let it land. The fact that you're asking that question means you care. And caring is most of what this requires. You really don't need a teaching degree. I'm sure you've heard that, but you're going to find it out yourself. You need to know your child. And that you already do, don't you? You need to be willing to learn alongside them, and you already are, aren't you? And you need someone to help you build the inner foundation that holds everything else when December comes and you're exhausted and questioning everything. That's what these 7 videos will be for. Each one is a stop on the road. Each one answers a question you're already asking, even if you haven't put it into words yet. And together, they're going to walk you from, I have no idea what I'm doing, to I know who I am in this and I know where we're going. Now, maybe you've been homeschooling for a year or 2 or more, and you clicked on this because something in this title caught you. You're not brand new. You're not lost. But something isn't quite clicking and you can't quite name it. Please stay, because this series isn't really about first-year logistics as much as it's about the internal foundation experienced homeschool moms often never got the chance to build because they were too busy buying curriculum, building schedules, figuring out co-ops. If you still find yourself in year 2 or 3 or any year beyond feeling scattered, depleted, or like you're running on empty, the stops on this road trip are for you too. You are also welcome here. So here's where we're going. 7 stops, 7 videos. Stop 1 is this one. You're here. Now what? That's this one. We're packing the cart and setting the GPS. Stop 2 is your why, the anchor for your whole journey. Before you pick a curriculum or set a schedule, you need to know why you got in the cart anyway. Because when the roads get rough, and they will, your why is what keeps you driving. Stop 3 is about redefining education. Here's where we throw away the map that says school has to look like something. You fill in the blank, perhaps a classroom, perhaps with particular learning outcomes, perhaps grades and tests and all the things. Well, we're going to throw away that map. Some of the best learning I've ever witnessed happened in an ambulance, a hospital waiting room, and an orphanage in West Africa. Stop 4 is going to be about your child being the curriculum. Your child. So you don't need to buy any? Well, that's not quite what I mean. But this one will probably change how you see everything. Your child's curiosity, their learning styles, their specific and singular way of being in the world. That is the point, the whole point. Stop 5 will be a discussion on socialization. Your kids already have what they need. I'm going to lay this one to rest for you. This myth about socialization, not with data, with a story about 40 Ghanaian kids and a game of duck, duck, goose. And stop 6 when it feels like too much, because it will. And when it does, I want you to have something to hold on to that isn't just push through. Stop 7 is that you've done the thinking. Now we're going to build a plan. That's where we arrive. We're not going to arrive at a perfect plan, but at confidence, which is better. I need to tell you something that most homeschool content will not tell you. Most homeschool support focuses outward on curriculum and schedules and methods and co-ops and read-aloud lists, what to teach and when and how. And those things obviously matter. I'm not dismissing them. But in years of coaching homeschool moms, I've watched women build beautiful, detailed, color-coded homeschool planners like I did. And they still feel like they're failing by February. Not because the plan is wrong inherently, but because the woman running it was carrying something that no planner could fix. Maybe perfectionism, pressure, the invisible script that says, if I don't get this exactly right, I've damaged my kids, I've failed them. Or maybe the comparison spiral, the burnout that nobody warned you was going to come in the 3rd or 4th year. P.S. It's going to come in the 3rd or 4th year if you don't create a burnout prevention plan. The loneliness of doing something most of your community doesn't understand. All of those things are not curriculum problems or routine problems or method problems. That's an inside problem, and it requires inside work. Here's what I know after years of doing this. You are the most important curriculum in your homeschool. When you tend to yourself, when you build clarity about your why, when you quiet the inner critic, when you learn to build rhythms instead of rigid routines, and stop running yourself to empty, That is when everything can shift. I call it the 1% shift, when you make a little bit of a turn. Because when you're driving and Google tells you, no, go this way, and it's just a block off, but you start going that direction, you do not end up at your destination if Google didn't figure it out that day. We need to make the occasional pivots or shifts. And when we do, we end up somewhere else. And when you make these shifts, everything shifts, not just for you, but for your kids and your whole homeschool family. And that is a road trip worth taking. That's the road trip we're taking. Now, I want to go back to that ambulance Land Rover for a moment. We're driving through the rural north of Ghana, farmland, small towns, red terracotta dust everywhere, kids in their uniforms walking to their schools, barefoot, books on their head. And I remember looking over at my husband quizzing our kids in mental math and looking at the Coleman cooler with the TB samples and thinking, we are so far from anything that looks like school. And also thinking my kids are learning more right now than they have in any single day sitting at a desk. They were learning that the world is bigger than they thought, that their parents were willing to be afraid and go anyway. And I'll tell you more on why we were afraid in another episode, but I'll give you a hint. It's about the year that Ebola was in West Africa. It was the year we went. So the kids were learning that their parents were willing to be afraid and go anyway, that people on the other side of the world have different problems than we do, sometimes, and also the same ones. That courage is not the absence of fear, it's the triumph over it. Your homeschool does not need to look like a classroom, and it doesn't need to look like mine. It needs to look like yours, built from your values, your family's rhythm, your children's specific way of learning and engaging. That's what we're going to build together. Thanks for being here for the first stop on the road. Here's what I want you to do before video 2. Write down one sentence that answers this question. Why did I get in this car or minivan? Why homeschooling? Not the surface answer, the real answer. Just write it down, because your why is your anchor. And we're going to come back to it. Subscribe so you don't miss stop 2, because your why is the most important thing we'll talk about in this entire series. It's what keeps you on the road when everything in you wants to pull over. And if you know a mom who just began homeschooling or who's been struggling quietly for longer than she wants to admit, would you share this video with her? She might need someone to ride along with her too. Here's your reminder for today. You don't have to know every turn. You just have to be willing to drive. Until next time, tend to yourself, trust yourself, and lead your homeschool from the inside out.